A wave of disappointment was sent through the Chicago Bulls fan base yesterday after hearing that the Bulls turned down a trade that included a top 10 pick at last year's trade deadline due to a mandate from ownership to stay and compete for the playoffs. We'll talk a little bit about that as kind of more details have come out about that since that time. We'll also look at the Bulls and who they brought in for their pre-draft workouts. A lot of names that I actually do like in that. That could be telling us kind of the trend that the Bulls are going into. And also the negotiating period now starts today for players to negotiate new contracts with their new teams well before free agency. We're going to talk a little bit about that, plus dive into the mailbag, all that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host here, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today. So we had a breaking news episode yesterday after it was reported that the Bulls turned down what was a top 10 or ended up being a top 10 pick in a trade for Alex Caruso due to a mandate from ownership to compete for the playoffs last season. Now, this tells us a couple of things. Initially, when the talk came out, it was kind of presented as we didn't know when the trade offer was made. But now that we know that this was at last year's trade deadline, where the Bulls got multiple picks that included first round, some that included multiple first round picks, and one of those trades was a pick that ended up being top 10 in this draft. And it also said that the Golden State Warriors were among teams that made an extremely strong push for Alex Caruso. Now, with that said, we know that they declined those trades, but that was at last year's trade deadline. And I like to give that form of reference. Not that that missing out on that isn't kind of disappointing. I know I said it. I love Alex Caruso. But we know that from where the Bulls were at the trade deadline to where they are now is a place where AK has talked about changes. And he has talked about needing to make changes and this not being the group. That does not mean they're going to move on from Alex Caruso. They very well could re-sign Alex Caruso to a 4-year contract extension that's worth $78 million, and they look to change other things on the roster. That's probably why the Zach LaVine trade is kind of at the forefront of the thinking with this team and with this front office right now. But the thing is I think if you're going to look at this in any type of positive light, the one positive light to pull out from it is that market for Alex Caruso that we've heard that the Bulls want multiple first-round picks is there. And it seems like multiple teams would be willing to give that up for Alex Caruso. So that is a positive. And I've said it before, if the Bulls do extend Alex Caruso, the one negative that brings is they can't trade him until the trade deadline. They wouldn't be able to do it in this draft, or you end up keeping a player that is good and good for your culture long term, right? So all those things still do apply for the situation. But of course, the disappointment to find out that, again, ownership is limiting the hands of AK. If you guys go back and look at my post-trade deadline live stream after the Bulls did nothing and AK came out, I said AK felt like a guy who was defeated. It may be a guy that just didn't know how to fix the team at the time is what my mindset is, but it seems like the front office was willing to do that, but the mandate from ownership is what limited them. So those are kind of positives to take, but overarchingly, there's still way more negative to take from this than positive because Jerry Reinsdorf still owns the Chicago Bulls. And with the team moving to a new network with, I can't remember the guy who left the comment, he pointed it out, and I feel like that was a great point. With moving to a new network, which was rumored as last season, and it came into fruition this offseason, that you want to keep a team competitive as possible to get new adapters to that new network, even though the Bulls being the fan base that they have, that people are going to find out ways to watch the game regardless. But I do think you got to look into that to a certain degree. Overall, when it comes down to it, is that this is another thing for Bulls fans to look at and say, this is just either an ownership group or a front office or however you want to cut it or whoever you want to give more part of the blame to, which both sides have their own part of the blame, is that they just don't seem like they understand it. And, the thing is, and shout out to Eco Bean, he made an amazing point in the comment section, and I love always giving guys their flowers, and the viewers, listeners, regardless, man or woman, I love giving your flowers when you bring up an angle that I didn't speak about or really think about. And he pointed out and said that the problem isn't necessarily that they want to stay this path. The problem is the fact that if they're going to stay this path, it means you're going to have to pay the luxury tax to add what this team is missing. And that I agree with that wholeheartedly. This team, keep in mind, even with them being right up against the luxury tax, they couldn't use their full mid-level exception to add. Actually, the last 3 years, the Bulls, well, I'm counting this upcoming offseason, but including this upcoming one, the Bulls could have added to their roster using the mid-level exception, but it would have sent them into the luxury tax, and they could have improved the team to a point to where maybe we are competing for more of a 6 seed than a 9 seed, right? But it's the fact that you want to keep this core together, and then you don't want to pay, because at this point, this core is expensive, and you have to pay to then fill the holes and gaps that are left on this team as far as the roster construction. And ownership does not want to pay the luxury tax. You have 1 foot in one door and 1 foot in, I don't know, a pile of shit, because you can't even say it's in the other half. Like, we just don't. Nothing makes sense. And it's frustrating because it's the continued lack of direction. And of course, people rightfully so have called out AK now for his comments and saying that, hey, I got the green light to go anyway. With this, I want even a rebuild. Well, now per this, it doesn't seem like that's accurate. Now, maybe things have changed, right? And while I get it, and I would love to stay in the negative because I'm pissed. But, as presenting a show, you guys know I try to separate Haize, the Bulls fan, from Haize, the content creator, where I can. Sometimes they're definitely going to overlap and my passion's just going to take over. But make no mistake about it. Not that I'm pissed about keeping Alex Caruso. I love Alex Caruso. But it's the lack of foresight yet again in the situation that the Bulls keep putting themselves in, where it seems like they're always try to strike too late on value. Now, if you end up signing Alex Caruso to that $78 million extension, that's the max. It's if he gets it. I think he's pretty safe to get it. But if you sign him to that, like, cool. You got a player that I think most Bulls fans like, respect. He puts in the work. He works hard. I'm not going to be mad at having that player on your roster. But if you do eventually pivot and try to go younger and try to do this team now that is younger and maybe isn't competing as well, but maybe taking a step back to get to, take a longer term step forward, you would have missed on a perfect opportunity to get multiple bites at the apple. And I don't want to hear the constant thing, oh, well, this draft is weak. This draft is projected. This draft, I've told you guys before, every single time that a draft has been labeled as the weakest draft in years, at least for the last 5 times that a draft has been labeled that, it actually turned into a really good draft. The drafts that end up being the biggest misses were some that people thought had some of the most talent, like the Bennett draft, right? So, those type of things play. And that's not to say that that's going to hold true this time. But again, you got to trust yourself. But at the same time, and the thing that I always like to present as well is that, let's say AK did have the 11th overall pick and a pick in the top 10. How confident are we in AK to be able to pick the right guys? That's a whole conversation for another day, because there is enough reason to be doubtful on that as well, right? So, but this is, of course, a lot of Bulls fans are rightfully so frustrated by it. This is another, now we hear that a trade deadline that maybe AK was willing to deal a little bit more than what we initially thought, but ownership put the limit on that. And that's what sucks, guys. That's what sucks. But we'll continue to push forward. We'll continue to cover everything here on Chicago Bulls Central as only we can do. But moving on to the next topic, and talking about the draft, right? The Bulls held a workout with 6 prospects yesterday. Those 6 prospects included Ron Holland, Terrence Shannon Jr., Ryan Dunn, Kyle Filipowski, Adim Bona, and Justin Moore. Those are the workouts that they had. And this is a nice mix of talent, right? Kyle Filipowski is somebody who I initially came into this draft with. He was kind of my number 1 prospect for the Chicago Bulls. Kyle Filipowski was somebody I was extremely high on. I've since kind of, Khalil Ware has passed him up, in my opinion, on just my own personal draft board, because I love what Khalil Ware brings. I think he has more upside than a Kyle Filipowski, but Filipowski still has a lot of that upside as well. He's a guy who can handle the ball. He can shoot the 3, took 3 3-pointers per year, hit it at almost 35% clip. Not amazing, right? But you don't want your center to be this amazing 3-point shooter. You just want him to be somebody who can hit it. The way he grew in rim protection as well last year, from his first year in college to his sophomore year, still a relatively young player. Well, all the players in this draft are young. 20 years old. He has that 6'11" wingspan. But at the end of the day, Kyle Filipowski is somebody who got that dog in him. Ron Holland's a guy who's projected to go, throughout most of this draft process, in the top 5. He's since kind of fallen from then. And then, of course, you got Terrence Shannon Jr., who a lot of people think has lottery-type talent, but, of course, his stock is dropped because of the case and outside of basketball things. But then you look at the other 3 in this draft. Ryan Dunn, Adim Bona, Justin Moore. These are all prospects that are slated to go in the 2nd round or potentially undrafted. And that's where it starts getting a little interesting in my opinion, because then you have to start looking at, all right, are the Bulls starting to look at some prospects that maybe could go undrafted. We've seen us do that the last few years. We've signed an undrafted player and added them to the Windy City Bulls. I do think that this current Bulls regime is trying to turn the G League team into a true farming system. And so Ryan Dunn is somebody who he's slated to go more towards the end of the first, beginning of the second. So I don't think he's going to go undrafted at all. He's drawn comparisons to like Herb Jones, Andre Roberson. That's a nice role player. It's not a player that you think is going to like turn into a star, but again, a nice role player who can score on the interior. His on-ball defense is excellent. He got the dog. He hustles all the time. He is a special defender in this draft at being 6'6" with a 7'1" wingspan. This is the type of guy that I can see the Bulls biting on. But the Bulls don't have a second-round pick, right? So it raises some questions on that then and say, okay, all right, so you're looking at this, but you don't have a second-round pick. What's that about? But again, that we can see what the Bulls end up doing on that. And then Adem Bona is a player that's a true center. 6'8", right, almost 6'9", with a 7'4" wingspan. Very, very similar to Kevon Looney, if you're positive on that. He hustle, rebound, shot blocking, athleticism. He brings all those type of things. A really big body as well. At that being 243 pounds, this is a guy who is solid. And I could see being a bench big in the league for a long time. And then you got Justin Moore, who is really a type of wing defender that can score a little bit, right? 9.8 points per game, but he is somebody who can do some things for you. So, the players that are projected maybe even go undrafted in this, I like them for their position. If you can get those guys as undrafted or you trade into the late second round, I'm not too mad at any of those guys. So the Bulls are, we're starting to see the full picture come together on what the Bulls could be looking for. A lot of bigs and wings in this draft and in this workout class. So I'm sure the Bulls will probably have two to three more workouts with different prospects there. So we're just going to start getting that prospect list together for the Bulls. And, I think this is positive. Overall, I like what the Bulls are doing here. I like these prospects for where they're slated to go to draft in. I even like the fact that the Bulls are looking at Terrence Shannon Jr. because, like I said, if teams are going to pass on him, which he's already gone from in a lot of mocks being in that middle, like that first 10 picks in the second round to being now towards the end of the first round, now that his case is closed, he is somebody as well that I think is absolutely going to go in the first round. But the Bulls are looking at some prospects that I do think they fit the team, either if you're going a different route with going younger or if you're trying to keep this version of the team together. I like what the Bulls are looking at here. Those players, an extremely solid list. And if Ron Holland falls, I get it. We don't necessarily need another guard, but guard/wing, right, for Holland. But I think when you look at it, you can't be mad, in my opinion, if the Bulls look at somebody who was slated to be in the lottery, a top 5 pick at one point. If he falls there, you can't be mad at it, in my opinion. 6'7", basically, with a 6'11" wingspan. He can play that wing. He can play the two. If the Bulls do eventually move on from Zach LaVine, he's somebody who on-ball defense, hustle. Like, he doesn't necessarily score the best, 15 points per game, but not a great three-point shooter. But, again, explosive, finisher, athletic. Couldn't be mad at that either. So we'll see what the Bulls end up doing here with their draft selection. But with that said, outside the draft, this is one of the first times where this is a new rule with the CBA is that teams can now negotiate with their own free agents. This is a huge new rule change. They can do that right after the finals end. And so now the Bulls can negotiate with Patrick Williams. They can negotiate with DeMar DeRozan. I don't know if Torrey Craig and Andre Drummond are a part of that because technically they haven't opted out of their deals yet. But your own free agents you can negotiate with, which I think this is going to help a lot with free agency being a little bit quicker, because if you have people that are players that do just ultimately decide to stay with their team, then you're not going into the free agent period, trying to set up meetings and things with players that eventually just stay with their team. So this opens up the negotiating window for the Bulls for DeMar DeRozan and Patrick Williams specifically. And we'll see what happens with DeMar. With the news that came out yesterday with the mandate to stay competitive, a lot of Bulls fans think, this means we're absolutely overpaying for DeMar DeRozan. And, I mean, you're right to think that, right? But with the reports that the Bulls offered DeMar an extension worth $40 million per season, we don't know what DeMar is looking for. Is it just he wants more years? Does he want more money at shorter years? Does he want to actually maybe go and see what other teams can offer him, in his pursuit to try to win an NBA title, right? And I can't be mad, if he does decide to move on, anything like that. But this sets up a precedence for the Bulls. Also, Patrick Williams. I think we'll know exactly how much the Bulls really do feel about Patrick Williams if they can get a deal done before he hits even restricted free agency and gives the chance of a team signing him to an offer sheet. So there's a lot that could happen in this period for the Chicago Bulls between now and even the draft. And I think that could help the Bulls kind of decide more on what they want to do with the draft. If they do use this next little over a week to negotiate with DeMar and Patrick Williams, and they can come to a deal that they feel is favorable for the player and for the team before then, it could change some draft plans, right? Maybe you don't look for a wing, even if you do let DeMar walk, if you're able to keep Patrick Williams, and you go more towards a big and you move Pat back to the 3, right? There's a lot of different options in that, but this is the first offseason where we could start seeing players sign deals as of tomorrow. And Brian Windhorst actually talked about that as well, saying that don't be surprised if we start seeing some of these star players re-sign with their teams before the weekend. And so, that could change a lot and it just makes free agency more clear. And as a fan of the sport and as a fan of the game, I think that adding more clarity and just being able to kind of simplify and refine free agency, you can't go wrong on there. So, we'll see what happens. We heard that Patrick Williams could get some interest from the Thunder, from the Pistons, things like that. We'll see if the Bulls can get it done. And ultimately, hey, if the Bulls do end up re-signing DeMar DeRozan and Patrick Williams before the draft, you just already know what that's going to mean. And we'll take that for what you will. But with that said, of course, with the news yesterday, we got a lot of voicemails. So we're going to dive into the mailbag for 3 voicemails. Specifically, this one's from TJ.
But, now to my question, bro. God damn. Can't stand these people, man. But with my question, I was wondering if, for free agents, say, for example, that as a free agent target, we got a center, right? So if we got our center in a free agent, would it be better for us to just pick high upside? Like, for example, I forget who you were giving as examples of some picks you would like for high upside and stuff.
TJ already know. I had to cut out part of TJ's voicemail. It was hilarious. But as far as high upside, I do think so. Donovan Clingan offers a mixture of upside and what you think that he can bring now, right, for this team, because especially if it looks like you're keeping the team together, I would prefer to go high upside. Khalil Ware is a guy that I like. I love Khalil Ware in this draft. He's become one of my favorite players next to Mattis Bucilis and Tajon Saloon in this draft. And so I like the high upside pick, but some people like the high floor. Donovan Clingan, somebody with a very high floor that you expect to be able to just at least be able to contribute as a solid, maybe double-double starting level center that you look at. Zach Edey, a lot of people, not for me, but a lot of people, Zach Edey is that as well, right? So I prefer high upside, but I can't knock the people who prefer a high floor, especially considering how the Bulls draft picks have gone the last few years. So completely understand that. But for your question, my preference is, of course, high upside. All right, let's get into this next voicemail. This one's from Corn.
What's the word, Haize? Hey, man. 2 words. Jason, motherfucking Tatum, man. Hey, I wish Pat was there. Hey, send this shit to Pat. Send this shit to Patrick, the fucking designer. Tell him, what was it, a year or 2 years ago, me and him had got to an epic debate whether than Jason Tatum was a superstar. And I said, yes, Jason Tatum is a superstar. He is Kobe 2.0 motherfucking oh. I said it, and I told him this. 2 years now, 2 years later, look at my motherfucking God. It's official. It's finally fucking official. My favorite player, my guy, my best. Everybody want to say Luka. Everybody want to say motherfucking Jokovic. Everybody, even that man, I love that man. But he's that motherfucking nigga. We got to give it up to him. I'm looking at him. 31 points, 8 rebounds, 11 assists. Jason Tatum is officially, I don't want to hear nobody else. I don't want to hear nobody else say the shit. He is now officially Kobe, Mamba style, 2-point motherfucking oh, and I stand on that shit. Shout out to the motherfucking nigga, man. Jason motherfucking Tatum, I'm so fucking happy for this nigga, man. I'm so happy. Hey, I just have to do that, man. You know, I know we're a Bulls channel, but you know what? We basketball fans at the end of the day. So I had to give a good, great shout out to my guy, the motherfucking NBA champion, Mamba. Rest in peace, Mamba. I know he's looking down at him smiling because he was training with him. He gave him the tools, and he used the tools to become what he is today. And he is now that nigga, man. Give it to him, man. Give it up. I don't give a fuck if you hated him. I don't give a fuck about any of that. I don't care no more. He has now proved to all you motherfuckers, especially you, Patrick the fucking designer. I want to see you on Locked On motherfucking Bulls, and I want you to give it up to fucking Jason Tatum, nigga. Woo! Blessings, kid. Love you, man.
One thing that I love about Corn is that he's passionate, but sometimes he lets that passion make him say crazy things. To say that Jason Tatum is now Kobe 2.0 after averaging 22 points on 38% shooting in the NBA Finals and 26% from three, and he had a negative plus minus in almost every game except two. I'm just saying, right? And again, those stats aren't end all be all. He assisted very well, averaging over 7 assists per game in this finals. He understood when he didn't have it scoring to make sure he gets other players involved. Defensively, he gave a lot of effort in, and you can't knock any of that from Jason Tatum. But overall, I'm looking at this. This isn't the series that, and I'm not arguing the superstar aspect of it, but to say he's Kobe 2.0, that's a little bit crazy, Corn. Like these are Kobe Bryant in the Detroit Pistons series where they lost that. Maybe those numbers, right? But this isn't Kobe being Bryant yet. This isn't the Black Mamba yet. You can't say that he's Kobe 2.0. But again, a lot of the knocks on Jason Tatum weren't fair either way. And I love that Jason Tatum and this group were able to win a title. Hell, I hope that we can be, as Bulls fans, be able to get that at some point. But shout out to Jason Tatum. Shout out to what the Celtics were able to accomplish. But Kobe 2.0 is crazy, dog. That's crazy. All right, let's get into the last voicemail today. This one's from Oscar.
What's up, Haize? Oscar, man. I just read, I don't know if you've seen it, the article from Will Gottlieb talking about the Bulls turned down a trade for Alex Caruso for multiple picks, including a top 10 pick now in this year's draft, because they wanted to compete for the playoffs. Two things. One, the fact that they actually wanted to compete for the playoffs tells me that this ownership group is that they have no idea what's going on with this team, because the thought that they actually wanted to push for the playoffs, like this team had a shot in the playoffs, tells me that they have no clue what's going on, and they're just seeing it as, hey, if we can get one or two, we could squeeze one or two more games out of these fans and sell a little bit more merchandise and a couple more beers. That's all it's about. The thought that, I'm not saying this draft is perfect, but there is talent in this draft. How good would it be for us to sit here right now and let's say had for example, 8th pick, 7th, whatever pick in the top 10 plus the 11th pick? I just don't understand it, man. And it's frustrating to see that this ownership group has no idea what's going on. Like, it's like there's no connection between ownership group, the front office, and what's really going on. And on this team's landscape. And then my second thing is, I love Alex Caruso. Alex Caruso was the player that would have been perfect, and I would have loved to have during the D Rose, Joe Luau Peng era, because he freaking would have been awesome with that group. But right now, he's our most valuable trade asset. Are we gonna go buy and do another Zach LaVine where we held out last year instead of trading him for RJ Barrett and multiple first picks because we thought we had a shot at something, and now Zach's trade value's in the toilet? Are we going to continue to make these same mistakes over and over where we overvalue these players and hold on to them in the hopes that, hey, it's like holding on to stocks for too long. You think they're going to keep going up and you don't sell at the peak, and then they bottom out, and that's what keeps happening to the Bulls. Tell me what your thoughts are, man. Seeing that article, I had a little hope because the draft is coming up, and that shit just brought my whole mood down with this team.
Listen, bro, I completely, like, if you look at Locked On Bulls that we recorded that posted today, Pat's completely, like, they've killed Pat emotionally. Like, Pat is done. His emotions are done. They've killed my boy's spirit. So I know that this has brought down a lot of Bulls fans, and I can understand why, especially when you look at ownership continually not getting it. And this is a case where looking at it, it's like, it's not even the front office. It seems like the front office did their part in getting the right offers at the value that they had for the player, but then ownership. And that's where it gets the scariest at. Like, if Jerry Reinsdorf is going to be inserting himself in front office decisions, I just don't know if we're ever going to get out this hole. But you have to get lucky either way, and maybe that's the case. But yeah, bro, I can't knock you at all for that. This definitely is something that hurt a lot of Bulls fans and has made a lot of Bulls fans shake their head. And so, it brought down your mood, it brought down a lot of Bulls fans' mood, and we'll see where they go with this, man. And like I said, it's not that, and you said it, not that we don't love Alex Caruso, but this is a team that is devoid of talent, and we need talent. And when you get more opportunities to add some young talent, promising talent, it hurts sometimes. But hey, I feel you, Oscar. Thanks for leaving that voicemail, brother. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.